Hello viewers once more and welcome yet again to another episode of Lunch Guide. I'm your host Chef Andy, and today we're going to be taking a nice beautiful journey through a very rarely used ingredient. We're going to be working with some arrowroot and we're going to be turning that into a very beautiful stew. But before we get that far, we're going to begin by introducing the ingredients we'll be working with today to give you a better idea of what to expect. So from the very front, we're going to be working with a medium red onion. You'll require a tablespoon of curry powder, a teaspoon of paprika powder. Also, you'll require 1 stock cube, about 2 cloves of garlic, a small handful of cherry tomatoes. You'll also require some tomato paste, about a teaspoon, 1 large green pepper, one piece of zucchini. You'll also require some fresh herbs there, coriander of choice. We're also going to be working with 2 pieces of carrot, 1 large tomato, about 200 grams of arrowroot that's already been peeled. We're also going to be incorporating 2 medium-sized potatoes. So these have already been peeled and soaked in some water. And last but finally, some salt for seasoning, some oil to cook with, and some water to aid in the cooking process. So don't touch that dial. We're going to take a break now, allowing you to grab your pens and papers for your notes. And when we come back, we're going to just dive right into it. See you after a short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are just tuning in, we've just been introducing the stew of the day, which is arrowroot stew. And now we're going to start this very simple process by heating up our pan on the side. And next we're going to start by preparing some of the ingredients which we'll be starting with. So we're going to grab our onion and our garlic. And we're going to proceed to chop our garlic very, very finely. Now, for those of you who may wonder, or rather may not actually know much of arrowroot, for the local term, we normally refer to it as Nduma. And this is a very particularly versatile potato in that it actually carries quite a bit of nutrients, has very, very little cholesterol value, and is also a very, very beautiful, healthy option for those of you struggling with diabetes. So for those of you who may actually have tried to cook this before, so for those of you who may not know, particularly where I come from, this is actually just steamed and we actually just peel it right afterwards, and we can serve that on a tea break or even as an accompaniment to a meal. But for this particular recipe, I'm going to be taking it a little further and showing you what you can turn it into, and you can actually probably also try it at home. Do send us your feedback when you do so. We definitely are very, very, very interested in hearing how your version comes out. So I'm going to proceed to chop up my red onion as well. So this we're going to be chopping very, very finely. So begin by chopping that in half and proceed by chopping it very, very finely. Be sure to go right around your root, making sure to waste as little as possible. Proceed to do the same with the other piece. Finish that off and proceed to discard the root. Now next up, into a hot pan, proceed to add about a tablespoon of some cooking oil. For this particular recipe, I'm going to be working with canola oil, but you are not limited to working with that. Olive oil is a very good but expensive option. You can also work with many other different kinds that are out there in your retail stores. So do have a look. There's plenty more you can be able to work with. So to start us off, we're going to start with our aromatics. And for this particular step, we're going to be using our wooden spoon to mix that through. And now we're just going to allow for a few seconds for our onions to cook and completely turn translucent. And while we proceed with that, we're going to start preparing some of our other ingredients. So I'll start us off with our carrot. So very simply, cut that lengthways and proceed to just slice that into about a 1/4 inch in thickness. And also a very good tip, you can always also try different techniques of chopping your vegetables. Remember, one particular beautiful correspondent to having a beautiful stew is actually having one that's more appetizing, one that's a little more colorful, and of course one that you actually diversify with different cuts, different vegetables, giving it a nice beautiful color and flavor. So we're going to proceed to chop our second piece of carrot. And finish off by doing the same to the last and final piece. Now just bringing your attention back to the pan. Once your onions and garlic are completely softened and almost golden brown in color, we're going to proceed to incorporate our carrots. Remember, these do take quite a bit of time to cook, but adding them at this particular step will aid in also giving them a bit of color, giving the stew a bit of flavor as well. Right, so while those continue, we're also going to add a bit of our green pepper. So I'm just going to slice that into half. And be sure to begin by coring out the stem end and also work your way around with the knife, making sure to completely get rid of that white inner membrane that's a little bitter. And you can proceed to discard and proceed to slice that very, very thinly. Remember, for the pepper, this will cook a little faster, so you may want to incorporate this a little later in your cooking process. We're just going to set that aside. Next up, we're going to proceed to chop up our courgette. So for this, I'm going to just chop that into some nice big round chunk pieces. Once that's done, we're going to also proceed to cube our arrowroot. Remember, of course, very important to pay attention to your pot. Now nice and hot, we're going to lower our temperature slightly. And now just to cool that off, a small addition of some water. Mix through. Now we're going to proceed to finish cubing our arrowroot. So remember, very handy to peel this in advance. You can actually also blanch them very, very briefly for about 8 to 10 minutes. That shouldn't allow for them to cook fully, but it will actually give it quite a bit of time to really soften, aiding in cooking it a little faster when you actually come to the last and final process of making your stew. Now next up, we're also going to cube our potatoes and proceed by cutting those lengthways and into some 1/2 inch cubes. Now for those of you who may also be looking at other different options of working with arrowroot, we have covered some beautiful tips of working with arrowroot in our previous shows. You can actually check out our Facebook page, which is BrandPlus TV. and you will be able to actually get a nice beautiful scope of a lot of many other techniques you can be able to work with when it comes to arrowroots. So we're just going to combine those in the bowl. And now, just to bring your attention back to the pot, I'm going to proceed to add some of our seasoning, beginning with a teaspoon of some paprika powder, about 2 teaspoons of curry powder. I'm also going to add my tomato paste, 1 heaped teaspoon should do. And proceed also to add your stock cube. Now at this stage, you're going to begin by mixing those together and turning up your heat to medium. Once mixed through, we're going to proceed to add our potatoes. Remember, those will also take a bit of time to cook through. Now proceed to mix everything together. Now remember, water is quite required for being able to actually cook that stew through. So I'm actually going to add quite a bit of water, and for this you'll probably have to make sure that the water just touches the surface of your ingredients. And all we're going to do now is allow that to continue simmering. This should take anywhere between 5 to 6 minutes. And now when that's finally done, we're going to come back and combine our last and final ingredients and proceed to cook off until the last and final step, where we are going to proceed to plate. But before we get that far, we are going to take a short break and clear up our station, asking you very, very generously not to touch that dial. We'll be right back in a very, very short while. See you in a few. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are with us just before we took the break, we actually had started some of the stew that is ongoing, and we're just about at the last and final process. So we're going to proceed to add our chopped up courgettes, and we'll also incorporate our green peppers. And now all you need to do is mix that through. Now at this stage, remember, it's very, very crucial to actually time it really well. Remember, you also want to make sure that your potatoes don't overcook. And to that, I will proceed to add about 7 pieces of my cherry tomatoes. Remember, these are very, very juicy. They actually carry quite a bit of sweetness, and they will actually enrich the flavor of your stew. Now once that's mixed through, we're also going to incorporate some of our fresh coriander leaves. So very simply proceed to chop that very, very finely with a sharp knife. Of course, always making sure not to incorporate any of the stalks. Now proceed to add that to your pot, and once more mix through. Now at this stage, you're basically going to be timing your stew by paying close attention to your green peppers. Remember, for the courgettes, they actually have a nice, beautiful crispness if they're not overcooked, and they do actually absorb that beautiful sauce really nicely. And also, very, very importantly, always remember to season your food. So we're going to add a small pinch of salt. And we're going to proceed to mix through once more, doing so at very low heat. Right, so once you get to a point where you can be able to really just, or easily just bend your green peppers, that should actually give you a nice big green light to proceed to dish up. So we're going to proceed to turn off the heat completely. And using a ladle, we're going to proceed to move our stew to our plate of choice. And as you can be able to see from the cameras there, a nice beautiful color coming through from the courgettes, nice beautiful bright spark of orange there from the carrots, and some nice beautiful specks of the green peppers. Now just to scoop a little bit more of that sauce. Now we can proceed to add our cherry tomatoes just around the sides of your bowl, and proceed to top that with a few of your arrowroots. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my very, very simple recipe and technique of making an arrowroot stew. And very, very importantly, very important also to garnish your plate. So we're just going to take some sprigs of coriander there. And that is ready for the serving. For those of you who may wonder what particular starches will go well with this dish, remember you can actually serve it just as it is, maybe with a small side of rice. Remember, it is quite a rich and healthy alternative to having a stew made from meat or chicken. So this is a very, very good option to actually serve as it is. You can also alternatively just serve it with some mashed potatoes or something very light, something that will actually aid you in having a nice, simple and easy lunch. So from the studios, thank you once again for tuning in today. For those of you who may have missed on the show, or you just recapped on the last and very small bits towards the end, remember, you can actually tune in onto our YouTube page on BrandPlus TV. You will actually be able to catch up on most of the new episodes and most of the dishes that you may have missed out on our previous episodes before this particular show. But from my end, thank you once again, and until the next episode, I'm going to bid you farewell and see you soon.